just have more credibility, I think. Times have changed so much, haven't they, that the idea of doing anything without engaging tenants just seems really, kind of short-sighted.
And I think it's, data has a place, but not at the expense of not speaking to the tenant.
Exactly.
I think it's part of the triangulation.
Yeah. It's not an either or, is it?
No, it's both.
You need both, the yin and the yang of how things happen.
And I think that it does strengthen the evidence that you're hearing to be able to navigate the direction.
Definitely.
Okay, should we go live in 3, 2, 1, and then if you could then introduce him then, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we're live.
I want to welcome everyone back. I'm here with Paul Hackett, who is the Chief Exec of Optivo and also Chair of the G15. I want to welcome you to the Live at Hack studio. Thank you for coming in on Housing Day.
Thanks, Leslie. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, really, really good. So the theme this year is tenant voice, and what I wanted to talk about was you and I have worked together over the last quite a few years, actually, talking about tenant voice. With my master's research and everything, but also there was the report that the University of Westminster did for Amicus Horizon back then, and tell us a little bit about that research and why it was, kind of how it happened and what the findings were. Okay,
the research was done back in 2015, and interestingly it was funded by the government, by the coalition government that at the time were keen to understand and more about civil society, about how people can get involved in running social purpose organisations. And they knew that we had been developing an approach to resident involvement that had gradually been gathering pace. But at the time there was no real evidence base to demonstrate the impact. We knew that it worked, but actually having hard numbers was a bit illusory. So our approach to resident involvement had gone back to 2008-9 when Amicus Horizon, as we then were, was in regulatory supervision because we were so bad at the basic services. And the way to really try and turn around the organisation was to work with residents, to ask residents what they value, what they want, and then to work with residents and staff and the board to come up with solutions. And we built a resident governance structure, and the University of Westminster study was really an opportunity to come in and have a look at this. Now, the work was done by Tony Manzi and his team at Westminster, and they number crunched a vast amount of data, complaints data, management accounts, key performance indicators, and it was the biggest study of its type ever done on the longitudinal impact of resident involvement and the financial impacts. And what they found was two things. Firstly, that resident satisfaction really improved as tenants became more involved in actually shaping the direction of the business. And secondly, and this was the bit that really interested government, I think, that money was saved, was a net saving of over £2 million. And they looked at just 3 areas of the business. And so in just those 3 areas, there were significant efficiencies because tenants are very good at working with landlords to understand where are we overserving, where are we perhaps not specifying things that people really value, what can we change, and how can that therefore feed into our operating costs. So it was a really amazing piece of work. We were really pleased with the outcome of the research, and I think it gave us even more encouragement to think, we're on the right lines here, let's keep on going with this.
So, I mean, what do you think is the issue that, we're hearing from a lot of tenants now that they don't, their landlord isn't an Optivo or, Homes and Sedgemoor or, a best practice organisation like, SOHA, that they don't feel like they have a voice within their landlord. How do you, what would, as chair of the G15, how can we encourage the landlords? I mean, I think it makes absolute business sense to be able to do it, as well as having a social purpose for doing it as well, because I think that there's a lot of benefit to having tenants involved. With my own Housing Day story and my journey, it was a lifeline for me to be able to find a new passion and a new direction. So what suggestions would you have for the sector and for Twitter to kind of how to turn people around? Because I know that we had talked about, you said it took about 5 years to change Amicus, and and when I interviewed you, I said, so what about the people that didn't get on board and you said they no longer work here. So, so what is, I mean, what would your suggestions be on how to turn an organisation around or to get people on board that are not on board with?
I think it's really interesting because I think it is fundamentally a cultural issue and it has to be led from the top. And it's not really about structures, it's more about being serious about really engaging residents. Because if it's tokenistic and residents are invited in to talk about a limited number of things and the influence that they have doesn't particularly change anything, then gradually they'll lose interest because they'll feel, well, why am I wasting my time? And then you end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy that residents are only interested in very local matters that relate to them. Yeah. It doesn't really have an impact, and management will revert back to thinking, actually, we'll look at the numbers and we'll look at what the data tells us and we'll make our decisions based on that. But for me, that's a really missed opportunity. There are more than 4 million households in this country living in social housing. That's 4 million households with creative, intelligent, imaginative people who could make a huge contribution, and those people have got a massive vested interest in their neighbourhoods being well run. And there's no question that residents are experts on the services we provide. I think there's great opportunities with the way we're modernising the housing sector through technology, through the use of data analytics, through mobile working, through self-service. And for me, taking residents on that journey is fundamental to achieving success. Because if you go through any big change, you need to take people with you. In a way, if you think about the way that housing associations would develop a strategic plan, for example, it would never be dreamt up in the boardroom and then announced to all the staff, this is what we're doing. There's an expectation that you involve people, that it's got to be bottom up, that you make sure teams are involved in designing the plan. It's the same with residents. Surely you'd want to talk to residents, hear what they value, and build all of that into your transformation plans, whether it's technology, whether it's growth, whatever it is really.
And then I guess my follow-up question would be, if you have to have, you're going to have some difficult conversations, and the relationship between tenant and landlord is always, can be quite contentious. Like, so how do you actually deal with that conflict? Because I think that's, one thing that that landlords are maybe scared of. I mean, and the one thing that, there's a lot of angry tenants, especially after Grenfell. I've tried to say in the places that I'm working in tenant movement, I would like a pitchfork-free zone. So, to have constructive, even challenging conversations. So how has you as a chief exec kind of dealt with those challenging, conflicting hot points?
Well, when we started our resident governance journey, bear in mind we were in regulatory supervision. We were terrible at the basic services. Residents felt very let down. They felt there's no point complaining because nothing would ever happen. So the starting point was of quite a lot of mistrust and anger. And I think you just have to accept the fact that people will bring, their experiences and their feelings around the table, and you can either respect that and engage with it and listen to it, or you can just shut down and kind of, not want to engage. And I think, as in all things in life, you're far better working through dialogue, understanding where people are coming from, empathising with where they're coming from, and gradually, if you focus everybody on trying to solve problems, and in our world, it's all about how can we deliver more homes and better services with the resources that we have. And if you involve residents in those discussions, invariably they'll want the same things that the landlord does. The goals will be the same, but the real benefit of having residents in the room when you're having those conversations is they can challenge you if you're making assumptions that don't bear out with their own experience on the ground. And they can come up with ideas that no one else around the table has thought of. And that's really powerful. So there's eureka moments when everybody's around the table creating and contributing, and that's enabled us to save loads of money. And it's also helped us with some really tough conversations. So back in 2011, when the affordable rent regime was introduced, that was a really difficult dilemma for housing associations. What do we do? Do we, take a stance that says we're just going to provide social rents, or we'll deliver next to nothing with no grant, or do we go with the current regime and accept there'll be some rent conversions and so on? So not easy, but we had that debate with residents, and over a number of sessions, and eventually the decision they came to was, look, we may not like the current system, but actually there's people out there that desperately need a home, and provided the homes are affordable to people within LHA caps, then we'll support it. So, it's not all easy conversations, it's difficult dilemmas, but far better we tackle them together.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely brilliant. So what is Optivo doing to engage their tenants for the social housing green paper?
Yeah.
What kind of things are you doing to make sure that the tenant voice is heard through your submission of that?
We are running a number of events. In fact, there's an event today, had an event yesterday in Sittingbourne, we've got events in Hastings in London, and we've used the NHF toolkit to help us to run those. We're gathering information together, and we'll be submitting a document that will be jointly owned by the residents and by the organisation on the green paper. We're also at Optivo working with G15 to come up with a collective G15 response. We think this is a really wonderful opportunity to get it right, and I think the green paper is asking lots of the right questions. I think some of the conclusions that are emerging we would question. Certainly the resident event that I attended before Christmas, no one in that room was asking for league tables and KPIs.
Yeah.
We don't have a problem with league tables and KPIs, they're absolutely fine, but if that is the outcome, it's a missed opportunity, because what I was hearing was we want to feel listened to, we want to feel respected and valued, and we want to feel that we can contribute to some of the big decisions that our landlord are making. So I think it comes back to culture, and sometimes for government it can be quite easy just to come up with a nice simple solution. Don't worry, there's a suite of KPIs, job done, tick. But actually we want more than that, I think.
And I think my take on the KPI thing is, as a tenant, if the service isn't right and I have an issue with my landlord, I don't care whether they're number 2 or number 50 on a league table. I want the service done right. So I think I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying league tables have, KPIs have their place, but they have to be, what is it that they're measuring? Just measuring for measuring's sake is one thing, but what is it they want to capture, and what is the outcome that you want to have? So I think that there is some room to develop that, but league tables for me is questionable, because whether you have a good report or a bad report, if your customers are not happy. And
interesting, a lot of our tenants, when we've had conversations about them on certain KPIs, for example, how many rings of the phone at the contact centre, or the speed at which a routine repair is completed. What people have said to us is that actually we're less concerned about you achieving 98% compliance with this or that timescale. What we'd rather have is you getting it right, and we don't mind waiting a little bit longer if it's right. So we don't want the KPIs to drive the wrong behaviours. But I think the fact that stigma is out there, that the Prime Minister is calling out politicians that are contributing to stigma, all of that is great. But the government are not there to really offer the solutions to the stigma issue. I think us as a sector need to come up with the ideas that we have, and how we can make the tenant voice more meaningful. And I think it's great that residents are getting so involved in this process around the country, and it'd be great to see what residents from landlords around the country say.
And how would you suggest for a Voice for Tenants group, and just asking, to obviously the ministerial events, they took a temperature check of all of the tenants that were at those events, but the majority of the tenants were at the events were already engaged tenants.
Yeah, sure.
And there is a huge, vast amount of tenants that are, we kind of refer it to as Kira's neighbour. There's someone on our steering group that said, well, how do we, whatever we set up, how do we get Kira's neighbour engaged and involved? And it's a silent majority. So what suggestions would you have to be able to reach the ones that are just either not engaged with their landlord, or don't have an opportunity to get involved with good structures like Optivo or Soha or any of the mutuals that are how can we reach them?
Which I think it's really important. We do find ways to reach them, but I don't think we should necessarily beat ourselves up if we don't get everybody to contribute, because one thing that really strikes me, I did a door knocking exercise a few years ago about the structure we were creating and knocked on people's doors and asked, what do you think about residents helping shape our business? Everyone thought, yeah, great, sounds really good. Would you like to personally get involved? No, definitely not.
No.
I don't have
Yeah,
enough time.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were all really clear. They did want residents to have a voice, and they did want residents to be involved. And I think that people take comfort from the fact that knowing there are some residents involved, it may not be them, but if their neighbours are involved, then they feel that's a positive thing. So,
I mean, I think it's kind of comparing it to, I don't really want to run for the council,
Yeah.
but I'm really glad that someone does,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
someone is representing me on my behalf, and I can vote them in or vote them out.
yeah.
And I think that is the kind of feedback that I've heard too, that a lot in some of the research I did at SOHA too, I think it was a really, really high score as well, that while not everyone is going to want to get involved with the tenant involvement structures, they're happy that there are those structures to exist operating on their behalf. That came through really, really strongly from there too. So is there anything else you want to say? What do you want to say for Housing Day? Or
I just think we've got a brilliant opportunity. I think that housing is such a fundamental thing to creating a decent, healthy, progressive society where we have good, strong housing policy. And I'm just really pleased that this Housing Day falls in the middle of the Green Paper consultation. I think the fact that you are leading it as a resident, as somebody that lives in a housing association home, is brilliant. And the fact we've got engagement politically from the government, from the opposition, I think really shows the momentum that has gathered, and it feels completely different this year. I really hope that that we can ride on this wave of public attention.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister attending the NHF conference.
Oh, wow.
What appears to be quite a high degree of political consensus that there is a housing crisis, that we need to build a lot more homes to deal with it, and frankly, that's the best way to deal with stigma, is to normalise social housing, and that housing associations need to play a big part in that, and that ultimately, if we're going to be respected as a movement by government, by the general public, by our tenants, we absolutely need to demonstrate that the housing association sector and local government is as open and transparent as we possibly can be. My dream for what would come out of the Green Paper work is that we would emerge as a more transparent and obviously accountable sector to celebrate the fact that we are a very inclusive movement, and we absolutely want residents to be involved in helping to shape that. So I think there's a lot to play for, a lot of great stuff I hope will come out of the Green Paper. I've got high hopes for the sector.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Leslie.
Okay, thanks.
Really delighted.
Bye everyone. See you soon.